It is a privilege for your staff to serve you, democratically elected City Council. We work hard to provide you with all the information and analysis you need to make the important decisions of the city. In the majority of time, we provide you with a wide range of information that allows you to be in a position to base your decisions on broad criteria, such as, is this action consistent with the city's strategic goals? Or does this item provide the needed services to the community? Or does this development have the right mix of commercial and residential? Now, 99% of the items we bring forward to you allow you to make your decision holistically like this and consider a wide range of factors to help you make your decision. But there are a few items that we bring to you, say 1%, where the scope of your decision is limited. Unfortunately, this item, the item before you this evening, requires your decision to be very focused and limited. You see, 14 years ago, in 2008, the Surprise City Council took action and set forth the acceptable uses and standards for this property, the property before you this evening. With that action in 2008, Council established property rights for the landowner. During the 14 years that have ensued, the landowner has likely made decisions and investments based on the property rights the Council established in 2008. That is why the decision before you tonight is very limited. It must be limited to the following question. Is the current plan before you in compliance with the planned area development approved by the Surprise City Council in 2008? Hence my apology. I wish you could look at this holistically today, but you cannot. That decision has already been made by the Council in 2008. Now, in a moment, Trevor Fleetham will present the formal staff presentation. In the end, staff concludes that the project before you is in compliance with the development uses and standards approved by the City Council in 2008. When I say that staff concludes, I say to you that I, the city manager, the community development director, and the team of professional planners and engineers that have worked on this project believe that the project is in compliance with the development standards approved by the Council in 2008. Additionally, the Planning and Zoning Commission has unanimously concluded that the project is in compliance with the development uses and standards approved by the City Council in 2008. If after your review this evening, questions and analysis, you find the project before you complies with the plan approved by the Council in 2008, it is proper for the Council to approve the item this evening. Now, at the beginning of my remarks, I shared that it is an honor to work for a democratically elected City Council, a body that has many powers vested upon it from the voters. Those words are not something pleasant or ingratiating for me to say to you. I am deeply sincere when I make that statement. And that is why it is with great humility that I say to you and advise you that even though the City Council has many powers, it does not have the ability to take established property rights from a property owner. Finally, if this project is approved tonight, I commit to you that we will provide proper, rigorous oversight, as we do with every project in our city, to ensure that the project is constructed in accordance with the approved uses and standards, with proper materials, craftsmanship, safety, and aesthetics. And now my colleague Trevor will provide the formal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the Council. This item before you is the preliminary development plan for the Truman Ranch Marketplace PAD. The subject site encompasses approximately 46 gross acres located at the southwest corner of Waddell Road and Cotton Lane, and is currently zoned Truman Ranch Marketplace Planned Area Development. Surrounding zonings include the Prasada PAD to the east, C2 and Maricopa County RU 43 to the north, and then various densities of residential to the west and the south. So to cover some background on the site, in 2008, there was a major general plan amendment for the subject site to change the land use designation from low-density residential to mixed use. The subject property was also annexed into the city of Surprise in 2008, and the city council approved the Truman Ranch Marketplace PAD under Chapter 125, which was the zoning code in effect at that time. In 2013, there was a general plan adoption for the current 2035 general plan, and there was an amendment that was approved regarding the high noise and accident potential zones under Luke Air Force Base and development within those zones. So for this specific project, in November of 2020, staff met with the applicant during a regularly scheduled concept review meeting to discuss the project. In December of 2020, the applicant submitted for a major PAD amendment under the subject zoning case. In January of 2021, the applicant submitted a second case for a master site plan. The review on that has halted since May of 2021 and has yet to continue. And then in August of 2021, there was a scheduled Planning and Zoning Commission hearing for the major PAD amendment, but at the applicant's request, that was continued indefinitely. After some time, the applicant then resubmitted in January of 2022, and then later revised the submittal in April of 2022. So to cover those application changes, the original submittal was in December of 2020, and it was for a major PAD amendment, and it was proposing some changes to the existing PAD and some of the development standards within that PAD document. After several reviews, some public outreach, and discussions with staff, the applicant decided to amend the application to reduce the scope of the application to only address the deficiencies of that original Truman Ranch Marketplace PAD and fit within the development standards that currently exist in that document. So the application is now for just the preliminary development plan in order to secure the original development rights and memorialize the allowed residential density, which is at 601 units. So here's the conceptual master site plan that's included as part of the preliminary development plan. As you can see, there's a series of commercial pads along the front, along Waddell Road, and then a few at the northeast corner along Cotton. The applicant's also proposing a self-storage facility just south of that. And then the remainder of the southern portion of the property is proposed to be a series of residential developments, including family apartments, senior apartments, and townhomes. So within the existing PAD, there are a series of development standards that we reviewed this preliminary development plan to. So there's a minimum setback requirements, which include a 45-foot setback off of the west property boundary. There's a 20 or 45-foot setback along the south. In this case, it would follow the 45-foot setback because there is adjacent residential. On the north and the east, there's either a 5 or a 10-foot minimum setback, depending on if they provide pedestrian access. And then internal to the site, there is no minimum setback between buildings so long as they're meeting the building code. The PAD also offers or requires landscape buffers, which include a 22-foot landscape buffer off of the major arterial right-of-ways, which is Waddell and Cotton. And then for collectors and streets, it's 10 and 5 respectively. Also within the existing PAD, there is an allowance for a reduction of the parking requirements so long as the applicant provides an approvable parking study at the time of site plan review. So that would be forthcoming. And then there is a maximum building height of 50 feet on the westerly half of the subject site. There was a traffic impact analysis provided for this project, but the final traffic impact analysis will be fully evaluated at the time of site plan. So with that, the preliminary development plan is found to be in substantial conformance with the existing PAD development standards, but full compliance of the development standards will be verified at the time of site plan, and those site plans will go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for final approval. Public outreach that was conducted included a neighborhood meeting in May of 2021 at Sunset Hills Elementary School, and it was also Virtual attendance was also allowed. The applicant created a project website that went live in June of 2021 and has since been periodically updated. There was an open house meeting held in June of 2021 at Sunset Hills Elementary School, and then there was a follow-up neighborhood meeting held via Zoom in May of 2022. A summary of the concerns that have been received throughout the outreach process include the density of the project, traffic, parking, required infrastructure improvements, amenities provided, the existing school capacity, crime, and property values. We also received a letter of concerns that included several different points. The architecture, in this case, we have not yet reviewed the architecture that will happen at the time of site plan. Setbacks, we have looked at the setbacks for the preliminary development plan, the conceptual master site plan, but full compliance of those setbacks will be verified at the time of site plan and will revert to the chapter 125 if needed. Lighting has also not been reviewed or approved at this time, and that will be done at the time of site plan. And the self-storage facility will be reviewed for compliance, and a conditional use permit will be required at a later date. I also pointed out the density concept, the graduated density concept, and the project density, and Lloyd will cover that now.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. As you're aware, Luke Air Force Base and the noise contours and the graduated density impact the city as a whole, not only the main base, but also the auxiliary field. What's depicted on the map today is in the purple is the actual noise contours, which restrict residential development under it. From there, that was established in 2000. In 2004, 2006 timeframe is where they came out with the compatibility studies that were done by the state. And that's where the graduated density concept comes from, is from the guidelines from the state. And it's basically that first band that you see outside the purple, the lighter gray or light blue, is a 0 to 2 dwelling units per acre. The next band is 0 to 4, and the outer lighter green band is a 0 to 6. And working with Luke, we tried to use those bands through the city as a whole to balance out that density ratio. Every project that comes into the city for review also goes out to the base for review and comments. The blue there represents our multifamily parcels, either approved and in some cases planned. And you can see if we stick to a set 0 to 6 and don't look at it in the broad band sense, we have no multifamily, for instance, around the main built out area today. So when we're looking and working with the base, we look at either on a parcel by parcel base or a project by project base, or for instance, the original town site, we look at the square mile as a whole. And when we were going through the Heritage District, we looked at that to balance out the density that would be allowed and compatible overall. Some of these had previous entitlements. So in that 0 to 2 band, we exceed that 0 to 2. We exceeded it before the statute and the guidelines came into place. But in the other 2 bands, we've been able to balance that and consistently work with that restriction to keep growth occurring and balancing out the housing products across the board, as well as to attract the commercial. When we looked at this site specifically and working with the base, we looked at the half section as a whole and the 320 acres. At 6 dwelling units to the acre, that would give us about 1,920 dwelling units. When we break it down, that shaded in area is actually what falls in that 0 to 6 density, graduated density. So that 281.6 acres times the 6 would give us the 1,689 dwelling units. And that's what we're looking at trying to stay within, even though we do have the support for the base for the 1920 for the half section as a whole. Looking at the already entitled properties and then what was proposed, we come out with a total of existing of 996 dwelling units. With what is being proposed tonight is another additional 601. And you can see we're at 1597 below that, below both the 1689 and the 1920. If we take the difference between the 1920 and what is proposed and allocated today, that still leaves a remainder of about 323 dwelling units. As you can see, most of it's all built with the exception of one rural residential parcel, and we do have a C3 parcel that is inquiring into possibly rezoning that also to multifamily with approximately 108 units. So that would still leave 215 units.
And so with that, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the subject case subject to stipulations A through D. And those stipulations include a requirement that one or more of the commercial uses planned be constructed concurrently with the residential development unit, and that there be a maximum of 601 residential dwelling units. So with that, I'll take any comments.
Vice Mayor Klein?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen. This might seem like a dumb question because I'm like the newest kid on the block here, so please forgive me if it's dumber than usual. Everything is mentioned that it's going to be reviewed in its entirety as part of the site plan when the site plan is presented. In your fabulous experience, could you share with me approximately what kind of a time frame it might be before that would be presented to the city and/or planning and zoning?
So if they were to submit today, our review timelines are 30 business days for first review and then 10 business days for each subsequent review. So let's say they get through in a decent amount of reviews. It could be in the next 3-4 months, I would say, that they would go before the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, so that would just give us a timeline as to when this item might come up again for public information. Mm-hmm. Thanks, appreciate it.
Okay, I'd like to hear from our city attorney.
So thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'd be happy to make a few comments. I've been debating because I think I'll take more than a few minutes as to whether I should stand at the podium and face you as what it would feel like being a court, and so I'd be in my element. But I think I'll stay here because I'm hopeful that the comments I make are beneficial primarily for the public. And I don't want my back to be to the public and addressing you because I know you have experience, even our newest council member, with understanding the role of the city in development matters. But I'm aware that there is a lot of misperceptions or misunderstandings by the general public sometimes when it comes to the city's discretion and the role the city plays during the process of development and the level of control the city has over development within its jurisdiction. So with that said, I want to also qualify my comments. As you know, my practice is not to give legal advice or legal opinion on a specific matter. Because of the attorney-client privilege and to avoid jeopardizing the city's position in any specific matter. So because of that, a specific legal opinion or legal advice pertaining to a specific project, the appropriate forum, as you know, is an e-session. And I'd look forward to an e-session later in this meeting if the council deems it necessary, and I'm prepared for that. So my comments tonight for the public are going to be in a general nature. They shouldn't be interpreted to be specific to this matter before council. I'm not, my intent is not to provide legal advice and say these are the standards and the requirements pertaining to this project. So just be aware of that. And I'll try to be brief. I won't try to give a legal dissertation because I put all of you to sleep. So with that said, I think the beginning, and I will also try not to meander too much, but first and foremost, there needs to be an understanding that the city of Surprise is a general law city. We're not a charter city. We're not the state legislature. We're not any other entity. And as such, any action the city takes, the authority for it has to flow directly from the state legislature. We don't have organic or natural laws we can rely on when the city takes action or regulates a specific matter. All of our authority flows directly from the state legislature, and the state legislature gives and the state legislature takes away when it comes to general law cities. We don't have a charter. And a charter, just for those of you that don't know, is similar to a constitution, but it's for a city and it's adopted by a city and it gives a city specific rights. We don't have that. We're a general law city. So we take our authority directly from the state legislature. Now, in the context of development and what the city can regulate and control in the context of development, the state legislature has passed a series of laws that are codified in the state law, Title IX, and they begin at Section 462. And the legislature has set out the extent of the city's authority to regulate development within its jurisdiction. And those statutes start out and they say a city can enforce and adopt a use code. And so we have your typical zoning. It says the city can distinguish between agricultural, residential, commercial, industrial, and set development standards. And then it goes on to enumerate a list of standards in which the city can operate. It talks about regulation of signs. It talks about setbacks. It talks about setting aside certain proportions for open space and et cetera. These are the type of development standards then that the city has taken and put in what we call our land development ordinance. And that's our ordinance that controls and gives us the authority, based on the authority the state legislature has given us, to regulate development within the city. So while we operate in that realm of authority and can't extend beyond it, there's also laws that push back and keep us in check and keep all governments in check so they don't trample private property rights. And these laws are focused on private property rights. And I'll give you a few examples. One constitutional one is the Fifth Amendment of the federal Constitution, called the Takings Clause. That's constantly pushing back on the authority the city takes and regulates of private development, because there are many ways to violate that. One of the traditional ways is what you would think of the city saying, or the government in a whole, I shouldn't just say the city, but saying we need a freeway, so your property's in the way, we need to take it. So there's a physical taking and there's a payment for that taking. But there's other ways that are more relevant to the development context. One of them being what's called exaction, where the city says, or the government entity says, in order to develop your private property owner, you have to give us something. You have to give us easements. You have to give us space. You have to give us money for fees. Different things like that. And the courts have said at some point those become unreasonable, and you've maybe not physically taken the property, but because of what you've required to be given in exchange for the right to develop, you've taken the economic value of that property. The one that's most relevant, though, for our usage here in the city is often a regulatory taking, where a government entity will put so many regulations and criteria on the development of private property that the courts have said sometimes you cross the line, you put too much red tape, and you made it basically not viable to develop the property per the entitled rights of the property owner. And therefore, you've taken the economic value, you've stripped it, you've put too many burdens on the property, and therefore the private property owner has the right to be compensated. So that's a regulatory taking. So these laws, which we should all be thankful for because they protect all of us and all property owners and give us certainty, continue to push back. And there's a balance of the authority the state legislature gives us to regulate against these private property laws. There's also statutory laws that push back, one of them being the Arizona Private Property Rights Protection Act, which was passed by the voters, I don't know, probably 10 or so years ago, which says you can't unduly burden or pass too many regulations that diminish the value of private property owners' property. So those are continually in balance and pushing back on government entities' ability to regulate and take property. So the city, as I said, has adopted a land use ordinance, and this is where I think the misperception starts occurring with the public. There are some matters that come before the city, such as annexations, rezones, major amendments to PADs, which the city has additional discretion. There's no doubt about that. They are considered legislative acts, but it's because they are not stripping or looking at entitlements that are already present. They're establishing new rights or amending the rights already attached to property. So in those cases, the city has more discretion. But as that development process then proceeds and beyond the establishment of new rights, how can I phrase this? As that process progresses, the criteria that the city can scrutinize and the criteria that apply to an approval or denial increasingly narrow. And so you start off with the broadest at a zoning, and then you get down to the very end of the process where you're talking about issuing permits and occupancy permits and or approving site plans. And you get to a point where the decision is administrative in nature. There's no discretion. You just look at the criteria that are already in place. So once those private property rights attach and you have use and you have development standards attached to a property, the city's ability to scrutinize and look at attributes and other criteria become limited, and they're controlled again by the authority the state legislature gives the city, as well as they're pushed back on by these private property protection laws. I can give a very simple example, and I will. So we have car dealerships west of the 303 on the peripheral of the Posada development, and there's some open lots over there. If we had a developer come in and say, I want to add to that car dealership row, and the private property owner is going to sell me the property, and we want to develop this as a car dealership, the city can certainly look at it and say, is the use compatible with how it's zoned? Yes, it's zoned commercial, and this is an allowable use. Are all the development standards going to be complied with? Yes, the site plan shows that there's easements, there's going to be access, there's going to be drainage, all these things will be addressed. What the city can't do, though, is tell the owner, we have plenty of economy type car dealerships. We really want to be the next Scottsdale, and we want some luxury car dealers. So how about you develop it in a manner that you develop a German car manufacturer dealer, right? It's got to be a luxury development. Oh, and by the way, the dealer you're talking about bringing in, they have a bad reputation, and we don't want unscrupulous car dealers in our community. We want to protect the consumer down the road. So you can develop it and put a dealership on there, but you can't put that dealership and you can't put that make or that model. And we want to scrutinize your business model. We want only profitable businesses in our community so we can get taxes. The city can't do that. That's an overreach, and that would burden that property owner, and the city would be stripping his rights. So you might be asking, well, then how does the city get the development it wants? Through incentives, and there are laws that limit those. But in general, we have an economic development department. We have other departments that work to bring in the businesses and make it profitable and easy to get and persuade property owners to develop the types of developments we want, with maybe the types of restaurants or types of retail or whatever we desire and the community desires. But on the other hand, we can't say, private property owner, you only bring that business, that type of restaurant, that brand, that make of car. All else need not apply, because that's beyond the scope of authority we have been given by the state legislature, and it would regulate private property owners too much. So I'll wrap it up and just say in summary that the extent of the authority we have is set by state law. There's a balancing we have to always consider between private property owners' rights and our ability to regulate. And this applies to everyone from an individual that saves their money and has the American dream and wants to buy, a quarter of an acre and put their dream house on it, to billion-dollar corporations. Can you imagine if a private property owner saves up their money, buys a small lot, and it's zoned residential? They want to build it. What they're going to build, their dream house, complies with all our standards. And at the same time, the city says, you know what, we don't like that builder you selected. So we don't think they're reputable. We think they do shoddy work. We want to protect you. So we're going to deny your permit because we don't like who your builder is. Oh, or by the way, the neighbors in the neighborhood like the vacant lots. They think the density is good, whatever. We're going to deny your building. So there would be outrage at that. And clearly it would be an actionable legal issue. So I'll just leave it at that, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Do we have some people that would like to address this body?
We have 20 speaker forms.
Okay.
Okay. And we'll start out with Mr. James Truman. You can come up to the podium. And just to remind everyone that you'll have 4 minutes.
Welcome, Mr. Truman.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Hall, council members, staff. My name is James Truman, and I'm a 75-year resident at 17301 West Waddell Road, the closest neighbor to this proposed development here this evening, Waddell Crossing or Truman Ranch Marketplace, PAD. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you this evening. The project before you tonight, which is FS 20-829 Truman Ranch Marketplace PAD, does not meet the legal requirements necessary for consideration and must be denied. I will clarify that in a few minutes. Please let me state that the Truman family allowed our name to be used on the original plan to develop the corner of Waddell Road and Cotton Lane only because the development promised to represent the legacy of agriculture of the immediate area, which we thought was very important. The proposal for you now, as presented, does not represent that legacy. We Trumans have never, nor do we now, have any interest in this development. At the Planning and Zoning Commission on June 16th, we presented issues of rules, regulations, standards, and ordinance to which we thought the proposed Waddell crossing did not conform. However, we were advised by city planning staff that we were quoting current ordinances and regulations, and as brought out earlier, they do not apply, and the outdated ordinances and regulations of 2008, 14 years ago, must apply and be utilized for this project because the pad was approved in 2008. In the staff report issued for this case, City Code Ordinance Chapter 125 of 2008 is stated over a dozen times to drive home the fact that these indeed are outdated ordinances which are the ruling authority for the current application for Waddell Crossing. Once again, outdated rules, regulations, and ordinances. With that guidance, a little research finds Chapter 125 of 2008 addresses the duration of pad zoning. In ordinance number 125-35, procedure for planned area development. If I may, I'll read this short ordinance in its entirety. It's titled Duration of PAD Zoning. Approval of a PAD rezoning request shall be conditioned upon the start of substantial construction beginning within 1 year of the date of approval action taken by the City Council. If, at the expiration of this period, the start of substantial construction has not begun, the property shall revert to its former zoning classification without council or commission action. It's an automatic reversal. With this straightforward language of City Ordinance of 2008, which is the stated authority here, as pointed out, the fact is there was no construction initiated. This pad expired in 2009 and reverted to original zoning of the area. The application for Waddell Crossing must be denied at this time for the simple reason there is no legally active Truman Ranch Marketplace PAD in existence. The property rights assumed in this application are no longer valid due to the expiration of this PAD zoning according to the regulations controlling this PAD from 2008. So if there are no questions, I will sit down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Stephen Truman.
Thank you.
And just for the next person coming up. Oh, go ahead, sir. I'm sorry. You go right ahead.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Hall, council members, and staff. My name is Stephen Truman, and I currently reside in Redondo Beach, California. I am co-owner of the Truman Ranch and lived there for the first 22 years of my life. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. The project before you tonight, FS 20-829, critical number, does not meet the legal requirements necessary for consideration and therefore must be denied. My brother brought forth the point that code at the time under which the PAD was approved and therefore those rights were defined at that time, that PAD expired in 2009. Nothing needed to be done. It was very clear to the original owners at that time what would happen to the land. These are not the original owners from that time. These are not the developers that worked on that Truman Ranch Marketplace pad. 14 years later, and they come forward with something else. They brought a letter from Luke Air Force Base that is attached to FS 20-829, which addressed the density analysis for a different project, FS 21-076. Different project number. As I said, the project number is very important. That is binding. That is what Luke Air Force Base approved the density analysis on. That's what the density analysis was performed on. And now they're bringing it forward with a different project. Therefore, this preliminary project plan for FS 20-829 and the city staff report for FS 829 both reference a Luke Air Force Base for this project, but both are false statements. No density analysis and no Air Force acceptance are available for this project before you tonight, and therefore you must deny this proposal before you. In order to legally develop the residential portion of the Waddell Crossing project, a new density analysis must be performed and approved by Luke Air Force Base and must comply with Arizona Statute Section 3, Title 12, Chapter 8, Article 2.1, which was very carefully covered by the city attorney. And that seems to be the basis by which the developer and owner of this current project are saying it must follow 125. 125 clearly states it expired. So if the city council disregards city policy and state law, you are responsible for the blatant misuse of city planning discretion in favor of foreign owners, not the original owners who brought forth the Truman Marketplace PAD in 2008. These are subsequent owners and out-of-state developers, resulting in the reduction of property owned by private parties, other property, not theirs. This is an unconstitutional taking without just compensation in violation of Arizona statute, as noted. So therefore, you're the elected representatives of the citizens of Surprise, must deny the proposed project and rebuke the use of the GDC analysis accompanying FS 2829. Thank you for your consideration, and I sincerely hope that the concerned citizens here tonight are afforded an open discussion amongst you on the merits of our objections of the legality of this project and any legal findings regarding those objections. Thank you, and if there's no questions,
Thank you.
I'll sit down.
Thank you.
Just as a reminder, there'll be a warning at 1 minute, then another warning at 30 seconds, and then the final. The next speaker is Quintus Shelsky. And then after Quintus will be Patrick Boyd.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. Thank you for being here tonight. And I'm Quintus Shulska. I live at 18263 West Banff Lane, the Sierra Montana community. At the beginning here, I'm going to go ahead and submit officially on record 545 signatures here that we have gathered for in opposition to this. So you know the voice of the people here.
Thank you.
I just want to address again that this is, in my mind, a dangerous development to go forward with. We think about making plans and doing things with planning in mind. You know, all of that needs to be seen here as well. The reason I handed to you a list of the top 10 developers, and I distributed that that do affordable housing, is so that you can understand that there are more options than those who just come to us, like Dominium has in this case. And I do advise the council to start becoming proactive in this area. Form a committee. I'm willing to be on it. Let's work properly in planning ahead for these kinds of developments. What's happening as a result, because we unfortunately didn't plan ahead, and there's we're dusting off history from 14 years ago, is that we're now putting ourselves in a very dangerous situation. You already know that the north side of that road can't be developed. The south side is going to be developed according to this master plan, and we were left with a Franken Road yet again. I know we deal with that at times and try to find solutions, but this creates a very dangerous situation. 2 charter schools already exist in that area. This new proposal from Dominium has nothing of that sort in it. Instead, it's another storage unit being added. It would be nice if perhaps it was a school instead in that other part of the development, but it's not. So we're going to overcrowd those streets, overcrowd those schools, create more traffic issues, create more safety issues and emergency response. And that area is just not ready for this. Other side of Costco, east side of the 303, thank you for building 3 lanes both directions. There's a lot of room on the south side for a development like this. And again, we should be investigating that and looking forward to that. I'm glad I went up unscripted. Mr. Wingo, thanks for explaining things here as city attorney. You say there'll be actionable legal issues if the council votes no on this, but I do believe that there's actionable legal issues should the council vote yes on this as well. When you take this to private quarters and you see, talking about diminishing values of private properties, there's a lot in safety when you take the safety away from the citizens already living there and those who will potentially live there by taking an action tonight that would approve this master plan. And I'll leave it that I'd just like everybody here who's opposed to this to quietly rise and show that you are opposed to this action tonight. Thank you for that. Again, Mr. Wingenroth reminded you, you're democratically elected officials, and you can make a democratically elected official decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick Boyd. And then following Patrick Boyd will be Pamela. I'm so sorry I cannot pronounce your last name. It's Tufegdzic if you're here. Go right ahead, sir.
Hello, folks. My name is Patrick Boyd. I live at 17568 West Hearn Road. Sorry, I've had a long day of teaching at an already overcrowded school. Looking at this proposed plan, Paradise Honors High School, which is right there in that district, has over 870 students. Paradise Honors District, between the elementary, the middle, and the high school, has already over 2,600 students, and we want to add another 600 homes. Of those 28 acres, that's putting 22 units per acre. That is a lot of families going in there. That's estimated at least 1,700 people moving in, because most people aren't going to move in there by themselves. They're families, they have kids. The senior center, that's going to have a 50-foot tall building. It's going to block the view that the Truman family wanted when they originally agreed to this deal. On top of those houses, you're going to have 882 parking spaces for each family, or for the families, 10 townhome parking spaces, and 447 parking spaces for the senior living, according to the most recent plan that I saw. That's 1,339 parking spaces. That leaves even less room for those 600 units and more traffic coming through our already congested roads. Just trying to get out of my house to go to work in the mornings, I get stuck anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes coming from Verde Vista just to Cotton Road. And then I have another 20-minute drive on top of that. Plus, I have to get my kids to school that I can't get out of my neighborhood because of the high school and the other neighborhoods going out. So overall, it's just a very, very congested area as it is. We don't have the room, we don't have the capabilities of the road structure, and we don't have the school structure for all of these homes to come in. As a teacher with an overcrowded class, 4 out of my 6 classes have over 35 students already. We can't have any more in there without having more space and more schools and more teachers to teach these students effectively. So not only is our area and our home prices falling, so is the education of our children. And I know most of you probably have children, grandchildren, so you can understand the importance of education. As a military veteran in this community, we've been trying to work with the city for several years to get a veterans community center, which we still have not gotten, but yet we want to add over 600 more homes for low-income housing tax credit. If we can't take care of the people we already have and support those that we already have here in the city, how can we support even more people that need that assistance? I know I talk fast, so hopefully everybody got everything. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike.
Next will be Pamela.
Pamela?
Are you here?
She's not here, but she was supposed to send in a speech to be read. So I don't know
Okay.
if you received it.
So we do, she's not here. Thank you. We do have a couple, and we're going to go ahead and enter those into the record, Mayor.
Right.
Okay. The next speaker is Patrick Disco.
I'm
Patrick?
going to withdraw as repetitive. All right?
Thank you very much, sir. Next person is Beverly Baca.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, staff, fellow residents. I'll also edit some of my remarks because I felt that Mr. Truman gave some very compelling information that I wasn't aware of when I first made my notes. I know that the council has heard a lot about the impact on the existing residents, But I want to speak a little bit too about what the previous speaker alluded to, the 1,600 plus people that will be coming in and what kind of a lifestyle we'd be providing for them. I retired 2 years ago and moved to, and I'm sorry, I didn't give my address. It's 17331 West Wildwood Street, Surprise, Arizona. I live in the Sterling Grove development.
Oh, okay.
Okay. 2 years ago, I retired and moved here to Surprise. Prior to that, I was the CFO for the largest affordable housing assistance for youth ages 13 through 25 in the states of Oregon and Washington. Among my duties, I managed a portfolio of over a dozen group homes and a residential campus. I'm familiar with transitioning properties that have community block grant encumbrances, and I've worked with neighborhood associations when citing these types of projects in existing communities. So I'm somewhat familiar with these kinds of conversations. And what I know from sitting on the other side of those conversations is that when these types of projects are cited in communities where you don't have community support, they're doomed to failure. High density always creates a need for more police, fire, and emergency services. That's a given. But without that support from the existing community, those resources go through the roof. You'll have nuisance calls and things like that from people who aren't ready to accept these new residents. And I'd like you to consider that in looking at some of your studies that you may have already done. I don't think you've adequately looked at those determinants. The other issue I have is that in looking at the income limitations and the rent amounts for the units that are being constructed, is that and I'm an accountant, so I'm going to talk about numbers a little bit here, is that they require 39% of the take-home pay that goes to rent. Right now, we're living in a time where inflation is 8 to 9%, and gasoline and groceries have gone up 30%. These people will be paying 39% of their take-home pay for these units, whether they're in a one-bedroom or a three-bedroom unit if they're a family. These types of units of Section 42 housing have historically always been located in city centers, and that's because these are low-income numbers that we're talking about. These types of families need access to childcare, food banks, and Social Security offices, those types of facilities. I just don't see that type of infrastructure existing here. I drive 10 miles one way to go to a doctor. I drive 5 miles if I want to go to McDonald's. My understanding is that Dominion has increased the number of parking spaces to be in compliance, but not while decreasing the number of units. Instead, they've just encroached on some of the green space. This makes these units even more unlivable. And creating more parking spaces does nothing to create the income for these families to have 2 vehicles, which is what they need, because basically we're out here in a suburban desert. There isn't any infrastructure for these families. Right now, this is a single family residence and agricultural area. And until we create more infrastructure, I just don't see this project as going anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person is Barb Barafato, and I don't believe she's here, but she attached a letter that she wants to submit into the record as well.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And then we have James Dutcher.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, I come before you today because I find that my city, the city of Surprise, is greatly out of balance. We are living in an unbalanced state because our infrastructure will not support this continued unchecked growth. Our police officers across the valley is facing an unprecedented shortage. EMS calls have gone up 73% in the last 10 years. Business expansion and housing has exploded. And inflation and supply problems are hitting people in an unexpected way that we haven't seen in over 40 years. There's also no public transportation in this city. In addition to that, Arizona has just been told that we now have to reduce our water usage by 21%. Okay. As a prior police officer, I know what these kind of housing problems will entail. I'm not sure if our Surprise Police Department is ready for this. As a private citizen, I understand the lure of the possible tax revenue coming from 1,200 plus people. I understand people need housing and a place to live. However, this must be done in a balanced method. The City Council are stewards for our great city. This stewardship requires the City Council pause the decision of the 2008 City Council, who had no idea what was going to be going on in 14 years. Until the city infrastructure is built up in such a way that it can handle this influx of people, we have no business expanding in this reckless manner. Okay. And with that, I call on the City Council to work as hard as they can to expand our infrastructure, our police, our fire, our roads. You know, everything needs to be expanded, needs to be shored up because we are coming up on hard times. Once our infrastructure is in place, bring in the development, but let's do it in a responsible way. Let's do it in a legal way. Let's do it in a way that our citizens can stand beside our City Council and say, these are our representatives. These are the stewards we picked to put forward our best interest. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker is Nina Silver. And then following will be George Bradbury.
Well, my name is Nina Silver. My address is 15125 North 185th Drive in Surprise. There have been a lot of wonderful points made here, so I certainly will not repeat them. Despite all the wonderful points that were made about the environmental impact and very justified points, the Truman Brothers really said it all, which is that this whole project is, or if you're following the letter of the law, should be legally void. And I really call Dominion to task for taking an outdated study and using it in their very elegant but flawed slide presentation. I find that really, really to be a cheap shot. The only thing I want to say to the mayor and members of the council are, it struck me, this is the first city council meeting I've ever been to, by the way. In your opening prayer, I was very struck by the fact that you thanked our Creator for imparting wisdom and discernment. And I thought that was a really nice sentiment. And I would ask you all to exercise it. Mr. Judd, I really appreciated your presentation, basically saying that the city council is limited in what it can do given the state laws. But I think you're really shortchanging the city council. You've already been given, aside from the environmental impact statements, a very clear legal proscription by the Truman Brothers on why this project cannot be. And I really, really, really wish that you all would exercise your power to the benefit of everybody who lives in Surprise. You generate an awful lot of goodwill if you did. And I hesitate to think of what will happen if this project is allowed to continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
George Bradbury. And then following George will be Nate Pomeroy.
Mayor Hall and City Council, thank you for letting us approach and speak with you tonight. I'm glad I am not in your shoes. All I can say. I am not going to talk. I think there's been a lot of talk about the traffic. There's been a lot of talk about all the things before in all these other meetings, and I think you've all heard it. But what I don't know is that you guys have made a wonderful City of Surprise coming about right now. You have created from the 303 going west, a beautiful community standard. And if you go and stand there and look, with the exception of a brand new condominium project that's going up, there is not a single building out there that stands above 2 stories. Yes, you can have 50 feet, but it doesn't mean it has to be 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. And that community standard you've inflicted on all of those other builders. Now you're going to change the rules and put up things in a place that it really doesn't belong. And your legal counsel tonight gave you this narrow scope, but he never said you can't turn this thing down. You can. And I've spoken with all of my legal people, and they've told me that you can turn this thing down. And there's a lot of reasons that you could turn this thing down. You have public safety factors that he didn't bring up that enter into this thing. Though, you don't have the right-of-ways on the other side of Waddell. And Mayor Hall and Duffy and some of the staff members, we've met and talked about this. And maybe that'll come about, but maybe it doesn't. And I mean, without it, the traffic is a disaster. If you look at what's going on right now at Cactus, and you've only got one lane right there, right this second, because they're saying the traffic is blocking Cotton Lane. You can't even get through. So I'm just saying this project has done all kinds of things. Truman has showed you, potential legal holes and stuff. If I was you guys, I'd put it to a public vote and not make the decision the way you guys are doing it, and let the public decide. But you just think about all the people that are out there, all the people have been here. I've been a pioneer out here too, and this is just not the right project right now there. And one last point, they at the last meeting, they broke it up. It's no longer, you guys aren't seeing the whole project. They've taken it and they've gone, well, they don't want the whole elephant, and that whole elephant got thrown aside. So this is a whole new application. A lot of the stuff they put up there today was from the old application, not this new one. You are looking at a bit of it, not the whole thing. And yeah, they're going to come back, and then you're going to get a whole bunch of people sitting out here again. They're all going to come up with, and they're all going to do this all over again. Why don't you just say, you guys need to go back and think about this thing and give us the whole project in its entirety so we can see the whole thing before we're making a vote. You're really only voting on one little bitty piece of this, and then they're going to come back and do this one and that one and this one and the parking, this, that, and the other thing. And they'll have many bites at the apple when they should only get one, because all those other projects that I think that are around me, they did it in one shot. And why should these people be able to do it in another? That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nate Pomeroy. And then following will be Cindy Severino.
Here comes the expert.
Hi, everyone. I live in the neighborhood. I think I know most of you. And I have some observations. And we were at the P&Z meeting, and that was illuminating. P&Z said yes, unanimous for this project. And one of the gentlemen, I forgot his name, but he was speaking at the end. And he said, you know, sometimes we have to vote yes when sometimes they want to vote no. Okay. So the city manager came up here and basically told you that you really need to vote yes. Otherwise, you're in trouble. And so there's strike two. City attorney educated us on why the council has to vote yes. He did a very good job. I hope there wasn't a test after this because I don't think I retained all of that. So now most of this group, a few outliers, but good people nonetheless, we're going to be sad because we lose the fight against these poor developers who care absolutely nothing about this community. They care about making a dollar. I'm a capitalist. I like to make a buck. So I can't fault them for that, but they're really not. This is a bad partnership for this area of our community. Give me a sec. So what I've come to understand also is that as in 2008, when the council approved the change in the use of this piece of property, they sort of did it not terribly effectively. You know, it's kind of left you in a bad spot. And what I think is that a yes vote on your behalf on this project will continue on this mistake, and it'll perpetuate it in a way that will never be reversed. I know a little about leadership, very little, but a little bit. And I know that being a leader doesn't always mean you take the popular or right decision, because long term, you may be right by saying no. And I hope that you can pull up that leadership, because I think that's the case here. You're also, as an observation, approving a lot of things in this plan that haven't been presented yet. And Ms. Klein, you mentioned when this is going to come forward. Well, by the time all of this comes forward and we go, oh my gosh.
You have a minute, Nate.
Got it, thank you. The cow's out of the barn. You've already approved it. You're just arguing about the details. And I think there's a lot more to argue about here than just those details. I also know, and I have to thank all of you who've heard from me too many times, that you've been working hard to fight this legally for over 1.5 years, because I don't think you like it either. Have some courage, show some leadership, put some faith in these people's belief in this council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Cindy Savarino. And then following will be Connie Phillips.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, staff. Thank you for allowing me here tonight to talk to you and to represent the Area Agency on Aging Region 1 in Maricopa County. I'm here tonight to represent all those older adults that are now homeless, primarily due to COVID. More and more have experienced eviction, living out their final years on the street. In 2022, so far this year, more than 160 people between January and June died on the streets. They were 55 years of age and older. There's also a newer and growing phenomenon in individuals over the age of 50 becoming homeless for the first time because they have been priced out of housing and either cannot find employment or have retired and rely on a Social Security benefit that is not enough to keep up with the Phoenix rising housing costs. Older adults being able to maintain their home on a fixed income in an area greatly affected by Maricopa County's annual inflation rate of 12.3% compared to the national average of 9.1%. Also, food prices have increased by 9%, while SNAP benefits have decreased. For 33 months now, Phoenix and the surrounding areas have led the nation in home price increases. In the last year alone, the cost of the median house in the area has risen by a third. Over the course of 2 years, up by 57%, yanking rental prices with it. Unfortunately, for Phoenicians and other individuals in Arizona, wages in the area have not been on the same high-speed elevator, growing only 5.3% in 2021. The median home price in the area has risen 216% since the year 2000, while the median salary has only risen by 48%. And it's estimated that 2025, only a third of the area's population will be able to afford to buy a home. For every 100 renters who fall into the extremely low income range, less than 30% of the area's median income, Phoenix has only 20 affordable vacant rentals. Low income and subsidized apartments are full and have long wait lists, more than 2 years. Once evicted, older adults face greater hardship in securing new housing due to cost of moving expenses, deposits, first and last month's rent, lack of affordable housing, as well as paying property taxes. We've also learned that many landlords are now selling their rental homes and the tenants are being evicted. Due to evictions, a lot of the older adults that are homeless didn't want to be homeless. That's not their plan when they retired. But unfortunately, because of it, they are now having to deal with depression and stress and disruptions to their health care, as well as other health issues, more chronic conditions that they've never had to deal with before. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Connie Phillips.
Mayor Hall and members of the council, I am Connie Phillips. I'm the president and CEO of Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest. And I'm joined here tonight by Robert Sanders, who's the director of our emergency services programs at Lutheran Social Services. And we've come tonight to comment on the need for affordable and workforce housing as part of a vibrant community in Surprise. Lutheran Social Services has been working in the city of Surprise to shelter and support individuals experiencing homelessness for several years. Our partnership with congregations and community resources in the city has given us a unique perspective, and we know that Surprise is a place of good neighbors where people can thrive. Founded by the Lutheran community, Lutheran churches over 50 years ago, who continue to be our partners as our organization today, our mission is to stabilize people during times of crisis, to build foundations where people can thrive, and to preserve dignity and respect for vulnerable people. And I will tell you that regardless of the program that we have, whether it's our refugee resettlement program or older adult program or those who are experiencing homelessness, we are struggling to find affordable and quality housing for people. Our people have worked hard. Some have retired after giving to their communities. Some are currently working. They want what we all want for ourselves and our families: good schools, safety, nice neighborhoods, and good neighbors. They want a place where they can belong and contribute. They want to live close to work. They want to live in attractive communities. And yes, they want to live in suburbs. Communities benefit from a mix of housing options. The workforce is shrinking. There are numerous studies that demonstrate that there are just not enough people between the ages of 18 and 65 to fill available jobs, especially as communities grow. So housing throughout the city makes a workforce more available so that businesses can find people and can thrive. People are waiting for housing. We encourage you to support a continuum of housing stock in Surprise, because a diverse community where everyone can belong will benefit and enrich us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Kyle. I believe it's Perwelo, Kyle.
There he is. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm just an average guy. I live on 182nd Ave in Waddell. Never been to a meeting like this, never talked in front of anybody. So don't have a lot of good things to say probably, and not very good at saying it.
You'll be fine.
Everybody ahead of me spoke very well and said a lot of things better than I can. Some of them paid to be here to say it. I think me, just as well as almost every other person in the community that lives near this area can relate that this will greatly impact our daily life and quality of life, as well as the people that are going to be living in this development. I'd say you guys definitely have a tough decision to make morally and legally. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. But I would say that the majority of the community is against this, and in a situation like this, wouldn't it be better to err on the side of the community, what affects them the most? Now, I understand there's a definite need for housing and affordable housing, but the infrastructure just doesn't support it in this area. Therefore, it makes sense to reconsider other options, something that doesn't have such an impact on us. Most of us moved out here not thinking that we'd ever have to deal with this kind of development in the area or this kind of congestion. I think that's probably about all I have to say. Hopefully you can take that and make the best decision with it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tom Musgrave? Tom Musgrave? Then following will be Jim Brubaker. Jim Brubaker?
Here he comes.
How you doing? Jim Brubaker, ex-police officer from Milwaukee. Moved here 7 years ago, retired early. We have a daughter. We're the first ones to build on Heritage Farms. Now, I see the low-income housing and everything, but now what really scares me is when that lady comes up and she's talking about refugees. Seriously? Are you serious? And I'd like to ask the city manager, would you put one of these up? You probably live in Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, North Peoria. You ain't putting one up next to you, I can guarantee that. Heritage Farms, 94 people. Aria Ranch, 139. Ryder Ranch, 141. Sweetwater Farms, 136. Terra Lane Communities, 243. Hayden Farms, 174 in Sterling Grove, 2,111. 1,084 of them are 55 and under. That's within a three-quarters of a mile radius. Where are you putting these kids? My daughter goes to Shadow Ridge. I was just there yesterday. We have 32 people in a classroom. You can't fit another desk. And I can guarantee they're not in your neighborhood. They're not putting, you want refugees coming in? Now they're talking, that scares the hell out of me now. Seriously, people? And then now we're talking about another storage unit? We can't do better than this in Surprise, seriously. I mean, people are angry. They've worked hard to move somewhere, to build a future. All these people, and I can guarantee you 99% of them, they weren't emailed, hey, this is what we're gonna be building by you. 4-story, 55 and over and low, income housing. We can do better than this surprise. We can, and we should. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you.
One more call for Tom Musgrave. Next will be Patrick Boyd.
He already spoke.
I have several duplicates, it looks like. Noel Boothby.
My name is Noelle Boothby, and I've lived in the city of Surprise for 20 years. My comments relate to Planning and Zoning Department as a whole. Throughout my 20 years here, I've seen the city grow, and unfortunately, that includes an overgrowth of storage facilities, low-budget restaurants, and discount stores. I heard the city attorney speak to incentivizing the types of businesses that come to Surprise. I would like to ask the city to look at the long-term plan, as we already have a storage facility every mile down Litchfield Road. Furthermore, if houses were not so close together, there may not be such a need for these storage facilities. Developers are the only ones winning here. In this specific community we're discussing, there's yet another storage facility. The building is 50 foot tall with units packed in. So I would ask the Planning and Zoning Department to start regulating both the types of businesses that come to the city, as well as the spacing of all master planned communities within the city of Surprise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Benjamin Cummings. Benjamin Cummings? Mayor, that looks like my last one.
Welcome.
Good evening to the mayor, city council, elected officials. I'm a retired New York City police officer. I served 22 years. 18 of those years were in the housing division in Manhattan, in the city. Very difficult to police, to say the least. My wife and I staked out Surprise 5 years ago. My mother and father-in-law live out here. They moved here in 2013. Hardly any of the houses were up. I live in Heritage Farms. None of the houses were up. My wife and I began to save, as probably everyone in this room, saved our money to move someplace that was safe for our children. We moved in January. The house was completed. Talking to the neighbors in April and found out about the situation with the housing. We were completely blindsided. We wouldn't have moved here if we had known about that. I did this job for 22 years. I was in the projects, dealing with the drugs, dealing with the prostitution. And every single night on the ring, there's low-level crimes. Somebody broke into my garage. Someone's trying to lift my window. A group of kids are trying to lift the doorknobs on my car with their hands on their shirts so their fingerprints cannot be seen. I can't say anything bad about the Surprise police, but they're understaffed. They're trying the best that they can do. You put that development there, you're gonna have trouble because they're gonna be the ones that are gonna have to deal with all the problems. They're the backbone of Surprise. They're the ones that go there first. I did it, I know what I'm talking about from experience, okay? They're gonna have to go and deal with the emotionally disturbed people, the domestic violence disputes, okay? Drugs in our communities, selling and using, overdoses, X, Y, and Z. I don't know very much about the fire department, but I know what the fire department does. They back up the police. I mean, I'm saying to myself, this is completely bad. 100% bad. And I would ask you all to please rethink what's gonna happen. You're putting people in a position where they've moved here to relax, to enjoy themselves, to enjoy life. You're putting people on their defensive. We were talking amongst ourselves. People are scared. No one wants to take the law into their own hands. They want to live someplace that's lawful. And that's why we moved here. I could have moved to any other state, but I didn't. I moved here. And so did the rest of the people in this room. And they wouldn't be here if they didn't care. They wouldn't be here if they were not serious about the community. I work now in my retirement. I know you all left my retirement years, but I work. I work at a car dealership, and that's what I do during the daytime. I'm not home with the blanket. I'm out working. And I think we need to rethink where we're going to put this. We need to give it a little bit more thought. We need to think about our police and what's going to happen. You know, they're under a lot of stress. They're under a lot of pressure. They're handling everything right now. Low-level jobs, high-level jobs. They're running around, and they're trying to do the best that they can do. I did the job. I know what I'm talking about. And it's just bad. And crime is going to go up. Crime is going to go up. Before I get up, I have 17 seconds left. I used to be a social worker, so I know the side of what the social workers were saying. And I get what they're saying. But there's places in Phoenix that this could be done, not in a community such as Surprise that is comprised of families. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is all the requests they have, Mayor.
Okay. Councilman Rumley?
You know, we've all heard a lot of speakers with a lot of things to say, and I'd like to request that we go to executive session so that we can digest some of this and maybe speak to council.
Okay. For a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, we will go into executive
We
session.
get a, Mayor, can we get a roll call vote?
A vote?
Roll call vote.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do a voice vote.
Okay, yes. Councilmember Hastings?
No.
Councilmember Rumley?
Yes?
Councilmember Duffy?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Klein?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
No.
Councilmember Judd?
No.
That is 4 yes and 3 no votes.
Okay, we'll be going into E-session.
And Mayor, just so the record reflects, the purpose of the E-session will be to seek legal advice.
Correct. Yeah.
City Attorney, could you please address the one legal issue on reversion, please?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, in addressing, with all due respect, Mr. Truman's,
Sorry.
Mr. Truman's statement about the PAD zoning no longer being in place and due to an automatic reversion. Automatic reversion is contrary to the current state law and the Constitution,
Okay. All right.
and therefore void.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Duffy?
Okay. So we'll have our discussion on this whole almost 2 years. Being a resident myself, a neighbor of this, I guess I can't talk about the complete safety issue this is going to be because that's not in the PAD. So I can't disapprove of that. The infrastructure that's not there, that we don't have right of way to get, there's also a Maricopa County well sitting at 175th. Everybody that lives in Sarah and Ranch or Heritage Farm, Sierra, Montana knows that well is there. Every morning I drive out to take my son to school. Traffic problems galore. So safety is a viable issue. I don't see why it's not. It's a viable issue. But I have to go on this. This is the 2008 Truman Ranch PAD. And I guess the question I'm being asked is, does this project meet this? Absolutely not. Not even close, if you read this. It wasn't supposed to be. It says, let me go through some of this with you. First of all, this booklet was supposed to, it says it right here, this booklet is to accompany the application for rezoning, which means this influenced the rezone decision. It influenced it. So council back then didn't get a paper that said, hey, we're going to rezone. You could possibly have 22 units per acre, this and that. No, they got this as basis of their decision. It was this. This is supposed to be a transition towards residential components. I don't see a transition. Mixed use designation allowing for uses including commercial, retail, employment. I'm still looking for the residential part. This project will become a gateway to the communities of the West by creating a retail shopping experience. Nothing about residential yet. The incorporation of these 3 zoning districts will invite a variety of appropriate land uses, including retail, employment, and commercial with residential component. This is not a component. It's almost the whole thing. Not a component. Not what 2008 council voted on. The goal for this project and this zoning request is to embrace both the future and history. By putting 4-story buildings next to the Truman Ranch does not embrace the history. I'm sorry, it doesn't. It just blocks it. It does talk about high density one time. High density residential component to the property to the south of this, it says. So never mentioned on this one at all. The architecture will reflect form, shapes, materials. Arizona Farms acknowledging former land use. I haven't seen that yet. Pedestrian-friendly zones will be created through the project as little islands of retreat from desert sun. I didn't see that either. There's pictures here of big open spaces, parks. I didn't see any of that. Furthermore, this project will establish a potential future point of pedestrian connectivity on the west property lines. This doesn't connect to any of the property lines. It's putting a fence around it. It doesn't do it. The marketplace will be sensitive in inviting both auto and pedestrian connectivity with the neighboring communities. That sure is not happening. Not even close. Building heights, so this is the good one. Building height shall be permitted as 50 feet high. And we all wonder, why would they approve that? I'll tell you why they did. Roof components serving the architectural character and also supporting the noise, light block and protecting the peace and serenity of the ranch-style living in pathways to the west and southwest. They put that so the buildings had architecture on top of them to make it look like farming and what it used to look like, to help with noise and light pollution to the Truman property. Four-story apartment does not do that. It doesn't. It doesn't do it. So, I mean, I don't know how much I need to go on and on about this. The question I was asked was, does this fit this PAD that council approved? No, not even close. So there's no chance I say yes to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I have concerns about the feeling that this is going to be the projects. That was the term I heard. I think my disclosure is I grew up in Hollywood, California. I've been in downtown South Central LA. I lived there for many years. This is not what that is. No matter what you do with it, this is not what that is. The people who would be moving into these properties based on the statistical information that has been presented to us would be our teachers, our...
Bullshit! What's the teacher's ears?
The average price, the average income for a starting teacher in this community is $42,000. That is an approved amount of income for persons moving into this community. We have other people who have spoken to us about the need for more teachers in our community. However, I'm sorry, sir, was it your turn to talk or was it mine? Thank you. My concern is if we eliminate some form of this community, the people that could live in this community at a salary of, I went around the community asking starting salaries at a number of businesses in the last month. Cadet police officers, starting firefighters, people who work in the banking industry start their beginning employees at those rates. These may not be what you started at. They were more than I started at. And if you go back in time, the people who moved into this community, maybe $40,000 for you at that time allowed you to buy a house. I don't know. But when I go out and talk to people now who are trying to buy a house on one or two incomes, granted, the prices on our properties have all gone crazy, but they can't afford to move into a house here in Surprise at the salaries that our businesses are paying. So if we raise all the salaries for all the people who live in Surprise, and if you're a business owner, you will tell me that that will put you out of business because you cannot afford to pay $50 an hour to someone to work for you, plus benefits, plus retirement, all of those things. It's not possible. So we have to find a way to take the next step. And whether this project the project to me is secondary because we don't have all the facts on what the project's going to look like at this point. We have half of it that says what they could do, the maximum they're allowed to do. And the next step is to come back and say, here's what we want to do. But if we say to all of your children who want to get jobs working here, who won't work for less than $17 an hour, where could they live in an apartment on their own at this point? Nowhere in Surprise. If they wanted to move out, and I remember being 18 years old and saying, the second I'm old enough, I will move out of my house. The only place you can move to in Arizona right now is way out of town or in downtown Phoenix. If you want to talk about downtown and South Central LA, I was just there a couple days ago. If you want your young people to live here in this city and be close to mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and all the other people who are here, how can we not help them in some way to live here? And the answer is, it should be near city center. There isn't anything better at city center than there is in this piece of property, except there are more jobs over there. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Have you seen that area?
I have, in fact, been to your area.
This is the warehouse district where there is jobs, where there is public transport.
Okay, sir.
This is not a conversation.
Hold on.
Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
I understand. My point is, we have to take certain steps. And sometimes those steps are not going to be popular with everybody. I get that part. But we have to take some steps to make some changes. And what the city council agreed to in 2008, if you were here in 2008, I was here in 2008. This city is nothing like it was in 2008. So, okay, they weren't forecasters of the future. I get that. I don't think that we have the right to punish our future employees, the people we would like to live here, our teachers, our nurses, our young professionals who want jobs, who are making less than $50,000 a year, and they are not living in low-income housing. That's not low income to me. Maybe that's low income to you, but that's not low income to me. That's regular people income. That's us. That's all of us who had jobs at one time and had to live in apartments because we couldn't afford to buy a house. So I don't want to say how I feel in voting, but I think we owe it to our community to be tolerant of the changes that have to happen to our community. That's all I have to say.
Councilman Remley.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few things to say, and I'd appreciate it if you maintain your cool so that your neighbor can hear what I have to say. I moved here quite a long time before 2008, and I've lived here at the same time all through the last recession when you could buy my house for $120,000 and today it costs $500,000. Okay? So I've been up and down with it, but it's not the same city that we had in 2008. We would have filled a goodly portion of our population with who's here tonight back then. So it's not the same city council either. The city council may have made some decisions that you probably would not have liked if they made them today. Possibly one of the decisions was how this PAD was written up and what people relied on. Most of you know the joke about the used car salesman, if his lips are moving, you know. Okay. They didn't have anything in there that said that the land would revert to being agricultural and grow only crops if it wasn't completed within a year. It didn't say that. Okay, what it did say is, we plan on putting in pretty houses and doing all this good stuff to it. Okay, when I go to buy a piece of land, I have expectations of what I want to do with that land, but those expectations are set forth in a code, in the zoning. Okay, once it's zoned a certain way, it can be developed that way. If you buy a house and it's got a vacant lot next to it, anything that the zoning provides for can happen to that property, and you don't have much to say about it, okay? And that's the position that we're stuck with today. So we may have to make decisions tonight, at least I'm leaning that way, that none of us like. I don't like it, you don't like it, but believe this, our council today looks at things a heck of a lot more carefully than we ever did before. Things are more important than they ever did before. And we, just as you, want to have a city that we are proud of. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any other comments. Councilman Judd, do you want to say something?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to say thank you for everybody who's come out. This has been the most participation I think the City Council has ever seen between this room and the room behind. So your participation is important because it also goes along to help educate and understand what some of our limitations are here. And we've got some frustrating limitations in front of us. And I've got a handful of questions for staff. I guess I'll direct them to you, Lloyd, or who wants them?
Either one, sir.
All right. So basically, the question in front of us is, does this match the zoning? Does this PDP match the zoning?
So the PDP is in compliance with the zoning. Further analysis when the site plan comes in, when we see the final civil documents along with the final site plan and the final elevations, is what staff will evaluate to make sure it is in compliance with the PAD.
If, hypothetically, if council were to determine tonight that it wasn't in compliance with the original zoning, would the applicant, what would happen next? I mean, would the applicant go back and revise it and come back again? I mean, what would happen?
I can't speak to what the applicant would do, but they have their choices. They could do that. They could pursue other avenues as well.
Okay,
At this
so
point,
but they'd have the option to correct it and come back.
they could make changes if need be. They could stick to what they have, but through the process, if staff's evaluating the site plan and the elevations and they're not in compliance with that ranch style, then staff will comment and they'll go back and either edit or they'll ask to move it forward. And it is at their discretion if we move forward with that.
And do we have any sort of solid definition on what ranch style would look like?
So ranch style, just like Mediterranean style, just like Southwest style, there's different variations of it. There's different opinions of what that is. So in this case, what staff is going to evaluate is, does it have those ranch style architectural components embedded into their design of their elevations, their stores, the commercial. So that's what we'd be looking at.
Okay. And again, as was stated before, I mean, we're not up here to decide whether or not we like their business model or their project. We're here to decide if they meet standards.
Correct.
More or less correct. All right. And so in going through our analysis, there were some questions on the residential density. And the original PAD had no residential density attached to it.
Correct.
And so can you go through what you relied on and how we got to a density?
So based on the fact that it was left out of the zoning document initially, we go back and we look at the general plan, and based off of the general plan, that gives you your range. Based off of knowing our partnership with Luke, and that per the uses, they are allowed under the PAD that multifamily or high-density residential. So through that process, that's where staff, and in this case, myself, does the analysis to make sure, okay, here's the band of 0 to 4. How are we managing that and looking at that? All right, here's what's entitled in this section. To do 22 miles, to manage 22 miles of different densities underneath the graduated density concept becomes very difficult. So we look at it primarily on a project by project basis or section by section, in this case, a half section. This way we can ensure that if each one of those half sections or projects don't exceed that dwelling unit count, then I know the band itself works. And in this case, working those numbers and working with Luke, we took what was originally proposed at 752 dwelling units and worked it down to the 601 where we're at tonight to make sure that it was manageable for staff going forward as to how many dwelling units would work within that half section.
And so we came up with mean, we have in our write-up here that, that the general plan outside of the loop contours, it had a density range of 15 to 21 dwelling units per acre.
Through the general plan that was adopted, the 2020 plan, it gave a range of 15 to 22 dwelling units.
So why would we use 21 instead of 15?
So it wasn't specified in that ordinance for adopting the PAD. So we're just looking at the range and they're falling within that range.
So do we have the discretion to say 15 is good enough?
I'll defer to the city attorney for that.
Was this an E-session question?
Yeah, that's an E-session question, Counselor. I'll tell you, staff looked at the zoning under the PAD, the uses that were allowed, and 15 to 21 is consistent with the use allowed under the PAD. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, if they came in at 13 dwelling units per acre, would we have to turn it down then? Say it was below the range?
No, because the PAD didn't require a minimum density. It capped it at 21, but didn't require a minimum as far as I know.
So our 2020 general plan, now our current general plan, we have requirements for graduated density. When you go from a rural area to a less rural area, it's supposed to be graduated. 2020 plan have something similar? I believe it did.
The 2020 plan mentions Luke, but it does not mention the graduated density.
Density is going from rural to more dense.
It had
outside
specific
of the loop band.
Yes, it had specific densities based off of the land use classification. So it was low density residential, it was 1 to 5. If it was medium or low to medium density, it was 5 to 8. And then high density, I believe, was still that 15 to 21. So there was bands depending on the zoning designation or the land use designation.
What about required transitions? Going from lower density to high density?
So when you look at typical planning and you look at what good planning is, if you look at the 303 in the corridor, that is a transportation corridor. And you look at the retail of regional commercial around it, and you look at the transition from that into a mixed use, so commercial to multifamily to low density residential, that is the proper transition.
So what about when you look at it from all the rural houses around it? I mean, you've got Truman Ranch, which is less than 1 dwelling unit per acre. And then you've got a lot of other developments around there that are 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre. Then all of a sudden, boom, 21 dwelling units per acre.
I guess it's still the proper planning transition that you would normally see when you're going from a transportation corridor or with the freeway with regional commercial to multifamily. To the south of this, we have the multifamily, which is medium to high density residential. And then from there, it's medium density RM9, even though it's less dense than the RM9 for the True Gold and the Heritage Farms.
Okay. So I went back and I watched all the 2008 meetings. And there was a lot of input from residents, mostly from Sarah Ann Ranch. I think that was probably the only developed neighborhood around there, right?
Yeah.
And as they went through it, they were pretty happy with the outcome. In fact, if you watch when it went through planning and zoning and a few things, but when it finally got to the city council, it was literally a 5-minute meeting, right? There was the presentation. During the presentation, or at the end of the presentation, they put up a slide. And the slide said, these are the 7 items that we're going to require the development to have. And I'm going to read them off real quick. Okay, and the first one was ranch style architecture. Number 2, interconnectivity. Number 3, pedestrian friendly zones. Number 4, design to a pedestrian scale. Number 5, lighting to complement the architecture. Number 6, shade structures. Number 7, the integration of plazas and courtyards. And then some of the commentary that accompanied that is they wanted to stick to the general historical theme of Truman Ranch. And so the residents that were present at the time got up and said, yes, this is great. This is what we want to see. We're so happy that we had this partnership to work through to come up with these criteria. And Councilman Williams was on the council at the time and echoed that settlement, and they passed it unanimously because it was a great project. And so from there, which they had 1 year to start building, which we've since learned in our e-session was unconstitutional, unenforceable, nothing we can go back to. But it was a great mechanism to protect the city and the residents from any sort of major changes in the plan going forward. I still would love to send it back. I mean, if it was up to me, we'd send it back. And so I am against this because I think it's too much density. I think the density should be at 15 instead of 21. And I'm not going to go to e-session and ask. I'll amend it if the council will let me. And that's really all. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Hastings.
All right. Wow. First, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's participated in this. My name's Jack, for those of you I haven't met before. I know we have some first-time attenders of the city council meeting. And, you know, I'll be honest with you guys, I'll just level with you. I've been on both sides of this issue over the last 2 years. We started doing this like right when I took office. It almost came for a vote, then it was postponed again, and now it's back before us again. And I've really tried my best to look at both sides. You know, I attended some meetings with Councilman Duffy. I attended his meet and greets. I attended, you know, a community meeting or two. I didn't attend the recent Zoom one. I drove out to Mesa and I toured one of Dominion's facilities. It was, you know, a 100-mile round trip, give or take. I've read a lot of your emails. There's a lot of them. This is a lot of emails, okay? 95% of them were opposed to this. I drove out to the area today, and, you know, we have this traffic light that's kind of strung up, you know, it looks like it could fall down at any point. No, I mean, it's safe, don't worry. But I can't imagine what that was like, you know, with one way in each direction with a 4-way stop. I mean, it just must have been chaotic. And I'll be honest, I don't live in that area. I live in Sierra Verde. And I share a lot of your concerns. And I could go on about, you know, the traffic that's already been discussed, the 2 to 3 schools that are in the area, the infrastructure not being ready for this. I could talk about the original intent of the PAD in 2008, back when I was, believe it or not, in 8th grade. And I don't believe that this aligns with what Councilman Duffy was reading in that original plan. I could also talk about the fact that it's 600 units, 3 to 4 stories, and they had to include a storage unit. And to me, it doesn't matter if it's affordable housing or luxury housing. The area is just not ready for that type of density. And almost done. We can't, as a council, and this is just my opinion, we can't be so focused on attracting new residents to our city that we forget the ones who already live here. The current residents don't want this, so I cannot support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I remembered one more question, so I'm sorry that I didn't remember it before. I also want to thank you all for being here. It's a lot of your time to come out of your homes and share with us with what you're thinking, and I appreciate that. The question that I had was brought up by Mr. Truman regarding the Luke Air Force Base designation of our current density. And Could you share with us, would there be a process to update that information in time when the site plan was presented to us to make sure that we have the current approvals from Luke Air Force Base?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, yeah, I can reach out to Luke. Through the process, the associated site plan that was going through at the time they were doing the PAD amendment is what they commented on as whole, as the project. From the beginning, we've been in contact with Luke and have talked through it, and that's where we ended up with both, ended up that Luke was comfortable with this density and the project as a whole, as long as we're willing as a city to manage the density within that 320 acres.
So if, as part of the process, we would then make sure that we would have that documentation at the time that the site plan is presented to us, so we could make sure that our ducks are in a row. Is that correct?
That is correct. I will reach out and personally make sure we have a letter from Luke for each one of the case files.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, Councilman Duffy, do you want to say some more?
Thank you, Mayor. Lord, I have a question. So going off the 2008 PAD and everything that's been presented, why, if they're not following, like this, for example, 44-acre project as a whole, contribute open space towards a strategically located primary plaza so it's attractive and sized appropriately for peak times and special events? That's not happening here. Why isn't that a PAD amendment? Because it's not, this is the PAD. This is what I'm asked to follow, regardless of what type of development it is.
Mayor, Councilman Duffy, I understand. And I think everybody's aware that 90% of the PADs have a lot of marketing materials within them. And I'll be honest, that's part of this process. And that's why as we've moved forward with the zoning code and individuals come in or developers come in with PUDs, we strictly stick to the facts of what the project is bringing forward as far as requirements. The amount of open space, the density, the layout, and gotten away from that. If you look at the Prasada PAD, is that the same vision that was originally envisioned when it first came through the city?
Well, we're not talking about that.
Understood.
So I have a question, though.
Go ahead.
So my neighborhood's Sarian Ranch. Okay, so the HOA came to me a couple years ago about a tree required from the sidewalk to the street. We asked to get rid of that requirement. No, they were told the HOA had to request a PAD amendment. So how come that marketing material doesn't get to just go away, but all of this does?
So that was specifically called out for certain areas within the residential PAD and highlighted. We will look at the site plan when it comes in for this project to make sure it conforms to the PAD.
The problem is I won't see that site plan. We won't see it. That goes to P&Z. So I want to see it now. So how do we, I mean, I don't know where to go from here. No. Obviously, there's not going to be a primary plaza for special events. So there should be a PAD amendment. So this whole thing should be a PAD amendment.
Yes, sir.
Is that it?
I guess that's it. I mean, am I right or am I wrong?
Councilman Romley?
You know, thank you, Mayor. As I said before, we don't have the same council today that we had before. But I think it's obvious to staff that we're asking them to be a little more careful about the things that they bring forward to us. And that they be a little bit more specific. One of the things that I can think right off the bat is the communities that they've been putting in without the amenities that you would normally expect to have, like a pool, for example. Oh, well, a pool was required if you had X number of houses, so we chopped them all up into 4 parts so we didn't have to have any pools. Okay? That kind of stuff is bygone and is not going forward, and not with this council, and I don't think with future councils either, because We've grown up a lot as a city since that day. Now I'm going to move that we approve ordinance 2022-18, the preliminary development plan for the Truman Ranch Marketplace pad, ordinance 2022-18. So I move that we approve this. Enough talk. We know that legally we can't get by the other way. And enough talk. We also know.
A second.
I told you you wouldn't like everything I had to say, but
I'm waiting.
but you know, sometimes we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. We're bound by the previous council and the decision that they made. So that's what I move.
Hey.
You got three gentlemen up there honest enough to tell you that it's wrong.
Yeah.
Why can't the rest of you see it?
Let's get on with it.
Why can't you have courage of conviction?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Sherry, I want a voice vote on this.
Okay, voice vote, yes. Mayor Hall,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Klein,
Yes.
Councilmember Winters.
Here.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Remley,
Yes.
Councilmember Duffy,
No.
Councilmember Hastings,
No.
Councilmember Judd.
No.
That is 4 yes vote, 3 no vote.
Wow. Everyone that voted yes should know that.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Care about the people.
Move to second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Post the votes.
City of Surprise water customers can also be water smart by taking advantage of outdoor landscape rebates. The city has a rebate for turf removal that gives eligible single-family homeowners 50 cents per square foot of turf removed, up to $500. Eligible HOA, multifamily, and commercial water customers with turf can also apply for a rebate to receive 50 cents per square foot of turf removed, up to $3,000. Have an irrigation system? There's a rebate for customers who purchase and install a WaterSense labeled irrigation controller. Customers may be eligible for the cost of the controller, up to $125. This rebate is open to residential